I'm with Kaya Duff, registered kinesiologist, newest addition to TriHealth. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. How was traffic?
It is the Friday before Thanksgiving, so
Crummy.
it was packed.
We're talking about weight loss and specifically when people plateau and things that you like to introduce and common misconceptions and stuff that we can talk about and educate people so that they don't feel like their hard work is a waste of time and then they give up. I think that's the most common thing.
Yeah.
So what would you say about it?
I think the weight loss journey itself is sort of that balance between familiarizing yourself with your diet and sustaining a good diet, and then as well as the introduction and adherence to actual exercise, sticking with it. And so once you overcome that initial barrier of getting the two sort of in tune with one another, sometimes it falls off, right? You find if you're not making so much progress, it can be tricky.
And Thanksgiving weekend can.
Oh, we're gonna see how this goes.
Yeah.
Come Tuesday.
So many people, they'll be like, you know what? It was my birthday, or it was a long weekend,
Vacation.
and they just, they went off the path,
Yeah.
and then it was like, and then from there it just all fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of a weird psychology. Like, why does so you would probably spend weeks being strict and getting results, one bad day or one bad weekend, and then it's like, I guess I'm not doing it anymore.
I feel like it's preparing for those setbacks, making sure that you're mentally ready as well, right? Like, okay, I know I'm gonna have leftovers after Thanksgiving, but then looking at those leftovers and saying, okay, I can portion those, right? Put some aside for yourself and say, all right, I'll work through those, and not just eating the turkey out of the fridge and things like that. But it's when you come off of that schedule of the actual exercise, then how do you get back into that? For myself personally, and what I also recommend to others is sometimes going full body, right? Preparing for like a full body workout as opposed to just upper body or just lower body. Some people will gravitate to those areas that are easier to work on. I myself, I prefer to do legs.
Yeah.
So I know when I'm coming off of a rough week, I'm going to go back to a leg workout, but maybe I do too many and I neglect the upper body, or I neglect focusing on core. But if I come back in full body, for some reason, I feel more whole, more complete in my exercise specifically. Okay. That's something that has worked for me for a little while and has worked for others.
Yeah. That's
something I started recommending to clients, friends, and family.
Yeah. I think it's smart because after like a little setback, I think it's not reasonable to think that you're just going to jump back into where you left off right before. And then even if you go back that first day, you're going to like feel it. You'll be like, something's wrong with me. So it's probably smart to like really just change it up. Even if, you're training on your own, like just to say, okay, that first day back, I'm just going to do a little circuit, just kind of do a little bit of a mix of things just to grease the wheels a bit, because I'm probably not where I was last week, and that's okay.
Yeah. That's the preparation for the setbacks, and often I'll tell folks, what would you tell a friend that's coming off a hard week? You would be compassionate with them, give yourself a break, but be encouraging. So that same way you want to show yourself that compassion. Okay, you had a lovely weekend. That's okay. You didn't do as, you did a 20-minute workout. You would normally do 40. Show yourself a little bit of compassion and encourage yourself to get back into it, right? So that's I think a bit of it as well, as that mentality.
I also like to work into someone's routine and their program that there is room to cheat.
Oh, yeah.
That there has to be that like you earned it in a sense, like and not trying to make a cheat meal or a blowout weekend like a reward, but more as like we're building this into your system so that this will happen. It's not that it's like, oh, you have to avoid it and maybe okay if you bad luck. No, it's like these things will happen. You will have a birthday. You will have holidays. That's you should be part of civilization, even though you have like these goals and you really want them. But then it's like if you do something that's off the chart, then you're like, it's all over. And it doesn't like that's just. I'm not sure what part of the psychology pushes people into that, where it's like, okay, well, as soon as I go off, I'm done.
Right.
And it's like, well, why? Like, okay, so, I mean, you started from scratch at one point. You're not starting from scratch now. And also that reminds me, like when I do the in-body analysis, I can see when someone trained and built muscle, even if it was years ago. The skeletal muscle, it tends to still persist. It may be, dormant and may have like fat covering it, but it's there.
Right.
So anytime you've lifted anything, think of it like it's like it cannot go away. Like it's built, it's there.
Yeah, that precursor.
Yeah.
It's gonna come right back. It makes it a little bit easier the second time around, third time. I've noticed that in many people.
Yeah.
Being able to pick back up, not quite where they left off, but I think a little bit sooner than the newcomers.
Yeah.
Right? They'll get back into it with a little more confidence.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that all of it is a confidence game, because most people are working on their weight and their body composition, partly for confidence, partly for appearances. A lot of it has to do with health, but however, there's different motivators.
Yes.
But I think being able to go through a cheat weekend and then bounce back, whether it's Monday or Tuesday morning, and then you're like, okay, you know what? I weathered that storm. It came, I endured it. I'm not like, I didn't throw it all away. And what's next?
Yeah.
And I think that does motivate someone to even like work out harder and go and like maybe break through a plateau, because that's something that a lot of people deal with, is just not even just bad weekends, but hey, I've been putting in the effort, and the last 2-3 weeks I've been static. I'm not seeing a change on the scale. What are some some points to focus on? Like what areas should someone be looking at, and what are things that can help someone overcome a plateau?
Those few things. So there's the diet aspect, and then as well as the exercise. The diet you probably will get into a little more depth than I would, but with the exercises, looking at those intensity levels. How are you feeling when you exercise, right? Like when you're trying to reach a goal, you can look at it from both a quantitative, so what kind of resistance are you working with? What kind of intensity level are you working at? As well as qualitative. How do you feel? How do you feel in the rest of your day? Do you feel more energized? Are you exhausted? You start to notice those differences in your body and in the other activities that you have to do. Something I've noticed they talk about, sometimes in other aspects of your health, but how do you compensate, right? So if you're someone that typically walks the dog for 30 minutes a day, and now you're adding in this exercise, and now you're only walking the dog for 15 minutes, right? How do you maintain those other behaviors, or are you compensating for doing a little bit of extra exercise? Making sure that you are on top of those other things as well as adding the exercise, and not just taking away from other areas of physical activity.
Sure.
That's one thing. So keeping up with those other behaviors, as well as then in your exercise program, how are you going to increase the intensity? Are you going to, with weight loss, picking up that intensity by maybe reducing your rest, or you're moving a little bit quicker? Maybe you're not lifting as heavy, but those faster movements and limiting the rest period, and actually bringing up the intensity that way, keeping the heart rate elevated throughout that workout. That's how I typically progress people with that goal.
Good. Yeah, that makes sense. Like to me, training should feel like climbing a mountain.
Yeah.
So it should not be at any point during your session. You shouldn't be coasting.
Right.
It shouldn't be easy.
Right.
And if it becomes, I mean, initially it might not be. And of course, people tend to follow a routine. And as you do that, then you're like, it gets easier and easier and easier. So that at that point, now you're like, okay, so now I have to increase the intensity. Now maybe faster pace, less of a break, like you were saying. And now we're kind of adding elements of difficulty, that because your body's adapted.
Right.
Now we have to kind of, again, shock it, change what you're doing, and make it, it's like, okay, you're good at that, now what's the next step?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Similarly with the diet, right?
Mm-hmm.
You might reduce your caloric intake. Your body might get used to it,
Mm-hmm.
and then other systems, other processes start slowing down. Your metabolism isn't going as quickly, and
Right.
how do you keep that up? How do you keep
Yeah.
making sure that you have that energy expenditure happening as well?
And that is still it's there's a lot of science and there's a lot of misconception, and it does boil down to a lot of individualization because
Yeah.
there's a lot of people who want to lose weight that are under eating,
Mm-hmm.
which is very counterintuitive because they'll come in and be like, listen, I'm barely eating 1,000 calories. I don't know why I'm not losing any weight. I'm like, your metabolism is completely dormant.
It thinks you're starving.
Yeah, but so
Sometimes.
yeah. So there is elements there where it's like not everyone is eating 1,000. Some people are eating. They think they're eating 1,500,
Right.
and they're getting 3,000 easily.
Right.
And it's like, well, I have 2 meals a day and a little snack. And I'm like, yeah, but there's something coming in. It's like,
Right.
oh yeah, you count that? Yeah. I mean, technically we should. And sometimes we have to. There's a lot of elements in terms of like rejigging how much protein versus carb versus fats, depending on. Some people are doing intermittent fasting, which I'm not a huge fan of because most people, they're not in a state to benefit from it. It does help people that there's not a major issue of dysglycemia.
Right.
Like their liver function and their ability to self-regulate that is where it needs to be.
Right.
A lot of people who are dealing with weight issues, they'll get benefits from intermittent fasting initially, and then they find that the weight's starting to slowly creep back on, and they're doing the same thing. And those are people I'm like, okay, we actually have to maybe get you to eat more,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe smaller portions, maybe a little bit more consistently throughout the day.
Right.
And there's an issue of consistency. Like people tend not to. They're a little bit all over the place. They kind of know what a good meal day is,
Mm-hmm.
but they'll hit that 2-3 times a week.
Right.
And then they'll be like, yeah, it was a bad day today. I missed breakfast, and then I was in a meeting, and then I didn't eat lunch until about 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's screwing up your metabolism.
Yeah.
You're not going to be burning any, even if you train that day.
Right.
And a lot of people are like, no, I think I should train on an empty stomach. And I'm like, theoretically, yes, but that empty stomach's got to be filled sooner than later.
Right.
You can't go like, oh, I worked out really hard this morning, like 6 hours ago. Now I'm eating. Like your body's like starving. It's gasping for fuel.
Yeah.
So
Exactly.
yeah. Well, I mean, if it was a car, people would treat it better because it makes more sense. Because I mean, we're a little bit more complicated in some ways. A car is like, okay, fuel in and it goes.
Right.
Cars tend not to gain weight.
Sometimes.
Not usually. I mean, I guess they could.
Fewer passengers.
What sort of I want to ask about like what measures people should look at to see that they're getting improvement, to gain motivation, because sometimes the scale, the weight is, especially in the early going,
Mm-hmm.
and especially when we're starting to change things and increase intensity, sometimes the weight doesn't drop.
Right.
But there are other things. What would you point out?
I think that goes back to the thought of the qualitative and quantitative measures. So I asked folks to keep a log. How did you feel while doing your exercise program, as well as at work that day and in your extracurricular activities? How were you feeling, like energy-wise, and energy not just fuel-wise, but literally how are you feeling, and even emotional aspect. I've had clients that they're not comfortable getting on the scale. They don't want to weigh themselves. Some of them will go back to quantitative, but in another way, using circumferences, checking out where are my thighs at, my waist, things like that. That's okay. That's more like appearance wise. They're looking for like a reduction of their mass, and that's okay.
I mean, it's not, to me, it's also a good measure for like cardiovascular, metabolic health. So if they measure their hip and waist,
Mhm.
like they may be looking at the cosmetic,
Yeah.
but I'm looking at like, well, we're changing this ratio,
Yeah.
we're improving things that way. So
Mhm.
things like your waistline and even how your clothes fit, I
Mhm.
think are good indicators to see like, okay, you know what, I haven't dropped weight in the last 3 weeks, but I added. I mean, I'm down a notch on the belt, and these pants I don't have to like suck in my gut to put them on,
Right.
and I'm feeling like when I bend over to tie my shoe, I'm not out of breath.
Right.
These are that's progress, and I
Mhm.
guess because sometimes people ignore the the importance of muscle building. So strength training is important not because we want you to be strong. I mean that's important,
Yeah.
but it's the increase in the muscle mass
Yeah.
that's increasing your metabolism. And muscle weighs. It has weight to it. And a lot of times if someone is maybe at the same weight,
Mhm.
but when you're looking at the muscle mass, how much mass there is in terms of skeletal muscle versus the percentage body fat,
Yeah.
you're seeing an increase in muscle mass and a loss in body fat,
Yeah.
which means your body's changing its composition,
Which is good.
which is exactly what you
what
want.
we want.
Because that is what, and then there's always this idea of like what someone comes in for is not necessarily what they're getting.
Right.
So someone can have an ideal like weight
Mhm.
or BMI, but their composition is completely off, like a skinny fat idea.
Right.
But when you start building up the muscle and you see your body changing, that's actually what you wanted.
Mhm.
What you wanted, what you came in with is like, I want to lose 20 pounds.
Yes.
What you ended up with, I lost 10 pounds and I gained 5 pounds of muscle and I fit into everything I wanted,
Right.
but I'm not 108 pounds like I wanted, like I was when I got married. I hear that line all the time. I'm like, that was 60 years ago.
Not quite. But I think that's exactly right as well, and you'll see that. I think that realization sometimes when you go through that in-body analysis and you start to talk about, okay, so we saw this is where our percentage of body fat was before, and our fat versus the fat-free mass. Well, now we're seeing that there's an increase in the muscle mass, which is part of our fat-free, and that's great. Like, we want to see that starting to increase, but the weight's not coming down the same. It can be tough because some people will still, on that weight loss journey, maybe you didn't want to increase the muscle mass so soon,
Mhm.
or you still wanted to bring the weight down a little bit, but then that goes back to how to increase the intensity throughout. But
Yeah.
I think there's an education aspect of that as well.
Yeah.
That's when we have to get into talking about, okay, when we start increasing this muscle mass, that's going to stimulate metabolism as well, and that's helping us along the way,
Mhm.
right? So I think taking the time to have those discussions and that's all part of your training as well. You have to understand what you're doing, I think,
Sure.
sometimes just as much as you have to adhere to doing it.
Yeah. And I think most people, they get it theoretically, like logically it makes sense, but they want to see changes. And I think that's just allowing some time to pass and then be like, okay, you know what? Like looking back in the last 3 months, I've dropped 5% body fat.
Right.
I've lost maybe 5-10 pounds,
Right.
but I feel way stronger. I feel like I have more energy. I fit into everything that I wanted to. And I do try to like get people not to get fixated on like visualizing an appearance that they want
Mm-hmm.
just because they saw a picture of on it on Instagram or something, because that may not be your structure.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are like, you kind of need to know your build.
Yeah.
What would be what's your healthy composition? What
Right.
you ideally would look like, irrespective of a number on a scale.
Mm-hmm.
So because at the end, your genetics, they want you to be healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So what's healthy for you? Like what level of weight? What's your percentage? Because different people are gonna have different body fats. Different. Some are leaner. Some have a different bone structure, and I think you have to have a realistic goal, and knowing that the effort that you're putting in is not in vain.
Right.
So as long as there isn't other factors that are sabotaging it,
Mm-hmm.
like drinking on the weekend, or that drive-through that it's like, I just do it once in a while. And it's like, well, maybe in 2 months from now, when you're like in a maintenance program, then you can cheat like that. But right now, like you're trying to get to a finish, like an initial finish line.
Right.
Now's not the time to be like, well, let's have a burger right now.
It's a slippery slope. That's the problem in those, initial weeks, especially.
Mm-hmm.
Setting, I think, the realistic goals. Where do you want to see yourself, sort of short term, with the long term goals still in the background, sort of in perspective. They're along the same trajectory, right? But making sure that initial adherence is strong.
Yeah.
That's really, really important to get over that initial hump, and then we might coast for a little bit, see that plateau, but that's what we're going to want to break through and head back up the mountain, back on that trajectory to our goal at the top.
Do you find that your clients will reach out to you when like they had a bad weekend, or when they're frustrated, or if they need like motivation?
I think that was a really tough time during the pandemic. It felt like there was always something came up. It was really tough time of getting used to the changes.
Sure.
A lot of people would come and be like, oh, this weekend was really tough, and here's why, or this week sorry I missed our last session. These are the things that are happening, and so I think that became a little bit more common. But I think people felt more comfortable talking about it.
Yeah, I think they probably felt a kinship because most people were in the same boat.
Yeah, and that made it a little bit easier to talk about, but also became difficult with saying, okay, these things are going to come up, but we have to persevere. We have to push through this. Recognize this is a part of life. These minor setbacks and scheduling changes, things like that. But all right, we missed that workout. Let's do something in between. Let's make up for it and make sure that we stick to the plan. If we said we're going to do resistance training a certain number of days in the week, let's do it. Let's make sure it's done.
Yeah.
And those were tough conversations.
Yeah.
Obviously, initially, you want to throw that compassion down and make sure that you're understanding. It was a tough time, but also bringing those end goals and even the short-term goals back into perspective. So that's keeping it all in perspective can be tough.
I think it's good to have someone that you're accountable to, because that's like, I can obviously the importance of like working out with a partner, because that is really good for motivation. But with the gym situation being the way it is or was, having a trainer is something that's like so invaluable, because now it's like I'm committing and I have to go in there and they're going to see my numbers, and they're going to see my energy level or how I'm feeling, and I can't hide it.
Yeah. So
that's a motivator to be like, well, then I better bring my game and make sure that when I'm not here, I'm following.
Yeah.
And a lot of people they're the same mentality with like our naturopathic patients.
Mm-hmm.
Some people they'll be like, I skipped our last appointment just because I hadn't been taking the supplements, I hadn't been following the diet, I wasn't really doing what you were saying, and I'm like, it's probably when you should commit, because when you're doing everything right, you're probably fine.
Yeah.
That's those times when it's like, okay, no, you need to come in so that I can nicely encourage you and motivate you and show you like, okay, well, you see where you're at, where your symptoms are, how they're coming back. What are you doing? Well, I'm doing all the things that brought them on in the first place, that when I took them away, I was feeling better. I'm like, okay, so what do you think we should do? We should go back on the plan. I'm like, sounds good.
And let's address the barriers in the plan.
Mm-hmm.
What's happening here that's throwing you off track, that we're not able to overcome on a day-to-day, right? Like,
a lot of people have issues with discipline.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know if it's like they don't like being told what to do, or they're looking for an indulgence in their life, and they figure like, you know what, I'm gonna cheat here because I had a bad day.
Right.
So there's like a bit of a self-sabotaging mentality.
Absolutely. I had that just earlier this week. The client was, struggling, tough day at work, and didn't want to show up, and then said, okay, I'm coming.
Yeah.
and made it. And you know, that was a good release. And so sometimes it can either be to a fault or it's a really good motivator, somewhere in between those tough days, right?
Mm-hmm.
I thought about it as well, like, what are my motivators to keep on it, to keep on track? I started thinking to myself, you gotta get a new gym playlist.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Okay, yeah, well, yeah, that's actually really good.
You know?
Because I'm excited to listen to, I put it together and see how it works for me.
You know? And then I thought to myself, okay, this is something I've got to hear from others. Does everybody have that one song you're waiting for in that gym playlist? Like, this is what's going to get me through at the end of this workout.
Yeah, put it near the end.
Yeah.
Don't put it at the beginning. You're just going to sit the rest of it.
Exactly. I thought to myself, everybody must have this. It can't just be me.
No, I never thought of that. That's such a good idea. Because I tell people you have to have something to look forward to.
Absolutely.
So you should have something to look forward to during and after your session, because now it's like, oh, I've been looking. There's my jam. It's coming up, and then afterwards, like, how are you gonna finish it?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it could be. Some people want to do like a protein powder or a shake.
Right.
Some people want to, I don't know, whatever excites you.
Yeah. I have a workout planned with one of my old roommates, and she's like, we're going for smoothies afterwards.
Yeah.
I was like, of course we are.
I would work out just for the smoothies. And if that's what it takes sometimes, then that's okay.
Yeah.
The weirdest one that I ever experienced, and I think I talked about another podcast, was I think I was probably in university, and I was working out not super regularly, and then I had dropped off a lot, and then Pumping Iron was on TV, that horrible documentary, but it motivated, it got me excited. I'm like, if Arnold can do it, I can do it. I don't know if that's true, but so then I just got really excited to get back in there. And then even when I was a little bit older, I gave myself a goal. I want to do like a bench press. I want to do over 300 pounds or something like that. So then that motivated me to, like, you kind of have like something to target.
Yeah.
So as soon as your training becomes like random, or what am I trying to do again? Because sometimes you'll hit your goal. Like if someone wants to get to a certain weight or body composition, if they've done it, what's next? Maintaining it. It's like, yeah, but maintaining can be kind of boring.
Yeah. You should always, when you're nearing that next goal, start thinking about, okay, what is next?
Mm-hmm.
Right? I think that's how you keep pushing.
Sure.
I feel like my life has just been really dynamic the past few years, where there's always moving parts, something is always changing, and so, you know, I'm at school or I won't be at school or something like that, and it always felt like there was a next goal, but that's not the same for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's, you know, it's just not the case. But I think you have to find something to work towards.
Yep.
Because I lose motivation if I don't have it. If it's not there.
Well, yeah, I mean, if there is not a set goal that you're working towards, then I'm like, then, like, why?
What am I doing?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's probably part of just getting older and progressing through life. And I mean, for myself, you know, being married, kids, that sort of thing, work, the exercise totally fell down the list of importance, but really should have, like, I mean, importance, like, it is important. Right. It can't be like, well, you know, I'll think about it. It's like, I have to make time for it. Mm-hmm. And I think sometimes even getting some new equipment, I've had so many people get excited about training again because of like the Peloton system, and then picking that up, whether it was just, you know, it was something new they heard about, or they're working out at home exclusively, so they needed something like that, and that's been a big motivator. Yeah. So even if you don't get the bike, I mean, you can get an app or something similar, or even just have, like, you know, just get a new video. Like, kind of, like, there's so many options.
Follow someone new on Instagram.
Yeah.
There's a lot out there. A lot of different communities. You find yourself feeling a part of a group or a part of a community, a team online sometimes, and I think that can be a big push. During the pandemic, that's what I did. I round up a group of friends, and I was like, guys, we have got to get on this.
Right.
We're all apart, and that's what we did. We did it virtually. And I think it kept a lot of us going.
Sure.
It was really motivating, I think, and seeing them cheering each other on, sort of too, like keep going, push,
Yeah,
you know, at the end of our sets, and that was really great to see, and that was really motivating even for myself, because I knew I have got to show up. Right? They're here because I'm here, and I'm here because they're here. And that's super important. And so even having that just sort of new group thrown into the mix, that really did it for me, because I was falling off on my own workouts and not feeling so motivated, just doing these body weight workouts at home, no equipment, things like that. It was tough.
Yeah.
And then I got equipment.
It helps. It does help. There was something that you said that kind of piqued my interest. Anyways, I lost it. Yeah, maybe. So many ideas coming in and out. What's your? I mean, this is more of a personal question. Like, how are you with your like in terms of sources of protein? Where are you with that? What do you encourage your clients? Protein shakes, food, vegan, whatever. What do you say?
I try to keep it balanced.
Mm-hmm.
I eat very set meals. I prep them.
Mm-hmm.
So I do like overnight oats for breakfast. I always have that. That's made with a nut butter. It's almond butter. So there's a little bit of protein in there. And then we have salads over lunch. And I have salmon with those.
Mm-hmm.
Mondays are meatless, so we have an egg.
Yeah.
And then dinner is usually chicken or beef. I try not to eat too much beef. Does sometimes upset my tummy, as well as dairy. So I don't eat dairy.
Me neither.
It's just hard. But
you know, because I do so much food sensitivity testing, every single person reacts to dairy. Everyone.
Yeah.
Everybody.
I know, which is sad, but
I had dairy on my honeymoon, and it was fantastic. Every day, with no ill effects.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Where?
I was in Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Something about Italian cows.
It's different where you go, but hey.
I don't know. I couldn't explain it because when we came back.
Tried it?
Yep. Bad idea.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
Okay. Coconut dairy free stuff is fine.
Yeah.
Okay. So, parting thoughts. Because you're seeing clients here, you have some clients on your own. What would you tell someone, like if they came here, what would they expect? What do you like to focus on? A little bit about your style, that sort of thing.
Initially, it's obviously depending on what your goals are, but if we are exercising together, we're going to spend quite a bit of time focusing on those movement patterns, making sure that we have good form, there's no functional abnormalities, and if there are, then what are we going to do to correct them? Mm-hmm. Making sure that, that we're progressing even initially, right? So we're starting with something that is sustainable. I don't want you to feel like you're that I'm overbearing you with the exercise initially, or that it's too difficult, because that's discouraging.
Yeah.
So we'll start with something, that will include your input. We have to see how you're feeling about it. What are you feeling like when you leave after your sessions? What's the rest of your week like? What's the time in between your sessions like? How is it affecting your day-to-day and the other parts of your life? And then, are we, when we bring it back and we reevaluate, maybe we do an in-body after a few weeks. I like to do check-in sessions. So that's like a sit-down quickly. How are we progressing with our goals? Take a look at logs that have been completed or haven't, and why. And then talk about barriers. What is stopping you from progressing here? And then setting new goals.
Yep.
Revisiting those goals and making sure that we're still on that upward trajectory. So that's sort of how it goes.
I think people can take extra confidence knowing that as a registered kinesiologist, you're able to work with any health population, young, old, any kind of limitation, disability, because you guys have the skills to assess and make sure that they're doing the right type of training and exercise and and mobility, caters to their limitations or ability. I think it's probably a topic for another podcast, but maybe briefly, if you can just address, I think some people have like an unhealthy, like they start becoming too conscientious about calories, and I find that usually people that are like they're already slim, but they're like, well, for my height, I have to have like 1,300 calories. Like they get a little bit too dogmatic because, I mean, they're basing it on what they read or what they hear, but sometimes they become like a slave to it, or it's overwhelming. And usually they start doing it on their own because when they have input from others, it doesn't kind of ring true with what they've known, and they kind of get fixated. So, if you've dealt with, a client in this situation, what sort of things would you recommend? I mean, obviously, speaking to someone to help identify what their calorie intake should be and understanding what healthy calories are, and I'll throw it to you.
I think I haven't so much dealt with it with clients, but even just in my personal life, friends, these things come up in topic all the time. I think it's always bringing it back into perspective, like what are calories? Like what are they to you? They are fuel, you know? I think really bringing it back to that healthy relationship between yourself and food, which can be really hard and sometimes out of the scope of practice of a friend or a kinesiologist, but just reminding them that you're more than the calories that you intake, and reminding them of what the calories do for you. They are what enable you to get to your goals. And reframing, I think, that mindset and looking at it from a more positive perspective. If I eat, I can do. Right? So bringing it back down to the basics. Let's get away from some of this jargon that we've read that's clouding our thoughts, and bring it back to just, okay, what do I want to do and how do I feel about it? Basics. That's it.
Good.
Keep it simple.
We'll leave it off there. Thank you, Kaya.
Thank you.
Okay. Until next time.